Good morning and welcome to All Souls Church. My name is Ross Edwards and I am your service assistant for this week.
And I'm Reverend Joanna Lubkin, minister of All Souls Church.
A few etiquette things. We keep everyone on mute for the service except for our time of sharing joys and concerns.
If you're new to All Souls Church, please take a moment to click the link in the order of service in the chat for our connections card so that we can stay in touch.
It's up to you if you want to turn your camera on and be seen. We do record the service, though joys and concerns shared will not be in the final recording.
Please feel free to use the chat box or to ignore it.
During the service, please feel free to get up, move around, or take a break from the screen as you need. But try to be as present as possible and imagine we are all in the same room together.
And finally, remember that when you are invited to sing or to pray, to share or to chat, how you participate or don't is up to you.
After church, we have some time to say hello in breakout rooms.
Now, hear these words of welcome.
All who enter in a spirit of curiosity, love, and justice are welcome this morning.
Welcome to people who love God, people who don't believe in God, and people who live in the not knowing.
People who find a higher purpose deep inside, people who find it in relationship with one another, and people who find it in the interdependence of all existence.
And all the people in between.
Whoever you are, whatever your gifts or abilities may be, however you identify your gender or sexual orientation, wherever your life and faith journey has taken you, you are welcome here.
Whoever you are, whomever you love, however you understand the sacred, you bless us with your presence. This weekend, beloved All Souls member Judy Ranny passed away in her sleep. She is remembered for being wise and kind, a great soul who is always looking for ways to serve others. She was passionate about injustice on all fronts, and she walked the walk, from digging into cleanup duty at the soup kitchen to organizing a conference on homelessness at All Souls. She always found ways to make her values visible in the world. Although Judy lived in Pennsylvania, we have been so glad that she'd been able to join us via Zoom these past several months. She will be missed, and we light our flaming chalice this morning in her honor and in her memory. These are words from Reverend Erica Hewitt.
The chalice, as a symbol of Unitarian Universalism, arose as a beacon of hope in an atmosphere of tyranny. The chalice arose as a sign of promise that the marginalized would neither be forgotten nor ignored, because they are beloved and precious from the perspective of the holy. This morning, we remember all of the people who have been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision or dehumanization, that they're anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we light this chalice, may we make our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all truly means all. And we follow the All Souls tradition of lighting a green candle, symbolic of our commitment to being a green sanctuary congregation. May both these flames call us to kinship with and great care for the earth and her living creatures. As we center our hearts, let's sing our chalice song for May, Plain Welcome All.
Together in
Our opening words this morning are from Reverend Karen Johnston. As we gather this morning, let us be a people of not forgetting. Let us practice holding collective memories that might otherwise slip into that enormous void that otherwise sucks at and corrodes any future we hold dear. Let us practice honoring truth-telling up from the past that must come fully into the now, lest we falter and fail, lest the whole remain in pieces. Let not our need for comfort or simplicity, for easy forgiveness or false pardon, smother the heartbreak that still needs healing. Let us practice resilience with reckoning. Let us marry memory and promise. Let us dance in the tension we find there. Let us rest in the integrity we cultivate there. Let us be partners with the possibility that emerges there. It is good that we gather. And in that spirit, let's sing our opening hymn, Gathered Here.
Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the Spirit draw near. Gathered here in the mystery of the hour, gathered here in one strong body, gathered here in the struggle and the power, Spirit draw near.
Some of us come today with heavy hearts, and we open our hearts to you. And some of us come in joy, and we share your joy. We take this time each week to reflect, to recall the milestones, the joys, concerns, the changes in our lives, and those in need of healing. If you have a heartfelt milestone, joy, or sorrow that you'd like to share, you're invited to share aloud or in the chat. If you'd like to share, you can come off mute by pressing the mute, unmute lower button in the lower left-hand corner of your screen, or by pressing *6 if you're calling in. Please share your name and briefly express what's on your heart. If you're having trouble unmuting, give us a wave and we'll try and invite you to unmute on this end. After each person shares, I'll drop a stone in water, symbolic of the water gathered and blessed in this year's water ceremony. And know that this section won't end up in the final recording. What's shared now is kept only here in real time. All are welcome to share now. For all of the sorrows and all of the joys that we hold in our heart, I'll drop one final stone to remember and to rejoice. With these prayers and milestones on our hearts, we sing our centering hymn, Spirit of Life.
Sing in my heart.
invite you to join me in a time of meditation and prayer. First in words, then in shared silence, and then in music. Our words of meditation today are from Reverend Barbara Pescan, a Memorial Day prayer for this Memorial Day weekend. Spirit of life, whom we have called by many names in thanksgiving and in anguish. Bless the poets and those who mourn. Send peace for the soldiers who did not make the wars, but whose lives were consumed by them. Let strong trees grow above graves far from home. Breathe through the arms of their branches. The earth will swallow your tears while the dead sing, "No more, never again. Remember me." For the wounded ones and those who received them back, let there be someone ready when the memories come, when the scars pull and the buried metal moves, and forgiveness for those of us who were not there for our ignorance. And in us, veterans in a forest of 1,000 fallen promises, let new leaves of protest grow on our stumps. Give us courage to answer the cry of humanity's pain. And with our bare hands, out of full hearts, with all our intelligence, let us create the peace. Let us be together in shared silence.
A religious community is like a river formed from many streams of our lives that meet and merge and flow to the sea. As members and friends of this religious community, we share our time and energy, our creativity, imagination, and vision, our talents, skills, and gifts, and the streams of our individual lives to create a river that is both deep and broad. A river that is made of many streams, sustains life, and refreshes the land through which it flows. But the river of this community also depends on our shared financial support that makes real our shared values and visions. We will now receive an offering for the support of this religious community and its work in the world. You can give online at the link in the order of service and in the chat, or you can have a meditative moment of writing out a check later on today and mailing it to the church. You are invited to give generously and joyfully as you are willing and able. Thank you.
Dona nobis pacem,
Today's reading is from the novel Homecoming by Jesse. History is storytelling. This is the problem of history. We cannot know that which we were not there to see and hear and experience for ourselves. We must rely upon the words of others. Those who were there in the olden days, they told stories to the children so that the children would know, so that the children could tell stories to their children, and so on and so on. But now we come upon the problem of conflicting stories. Whose story do we believe? We believe the one who has the power. He is the one who gets to write the story. So when you study history, you must always ask yourself, whose story am I missing? Whose voice was suppressed so that this voice could come forth? Once you have figured that out, you must find that story too. From there, you begin to get a clearer, yet still imperfect, picture.
On the night of May 31st, 1921, 7-year-old Viola Fletcher went to bed in her family's home in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She and her parents and her 5 siblings lived in the thriving Black neighborhood of Greenwood, one that was rich not just in wealth, but in culture and connection. In the middle of the night, her parents woke up Viola and her siblings, and they fled for their lives. This week, at the age of 107, Miss Fletcher and her 106-year-old little brother testified before Congress about the event that came to be known as the Tulsa Race Massacre. Perhaps you've heard some of the footage. The New York Times describes the events this way. On May 31st and June 1st, 1921, white mobs descended on the Greenwood district in Tulsa, Oklahoma, shooting and pillaging their way through a vibrant and prosperous Black enclave, reducing it to rubble. Low-flying airplanes dropped burning turpentine balls, leaving an entire block in what one eyewitness described as a mass of flame. An all-white local contingent of the National Guard turned a machine gun on the Mount Zion Baptist Church, systematically raking the walls with heavy fire until the stalwart building gave way in a cascade of shattered glass and tumbling bricks. The Times goes on to say that the triggering incident was the allegation, which was almost certainly false, that a young African-American man had sexually assaulted a white teenage girl. The fighting started after a group of Black World War I veterans arrived at the courthouse to protect the accused young man from a gathering lynch mob. The numbers present a staggering portrait of loss. 35 blocks burned to the ground, as many as 300 dead, many buried in mass graves, hundreds injured, 8,000 to 10,000 people left homeless, more than 1,470 homes burned or looted, and eventually 6,000 detained in internment camps. This is rarely covered in American history classes, although maybe you've learned of it since being in school. I know I didn't learn about it. About a year ago, my mother mentioned offhandedly that she'd seen some documentary, quote, about that horrible violence against Black people in Tulsa and how white people had wiped out an entire Black community. And I had no idea what she was talking about. I had to Google it when I got home. And Google just woke up because I said its name. You've probably heard the old saying that history is written by the winners, or we could say, as the author Jesse does, that history is written by those with systemic power. In fact, a great deal of care was taken by various people in power to cover up the story. Even newspaper archives from the time have had articles about the Tulsa Massacre physically cut out from its microfiche film so as not to leave a record. But we have had eyewitness accounts for a full 100 years, like that of Ms. Fletcher. What's important to note is that not only has this brutal act of white supremacist violence been hushed up, not just the trauma of the event, but we also need to note the triumph of the Black community that had made Greenwood so prosperous. So let's back up and tell that story. Just a few generations out from being enslaved, Black Americans built up a community built by Black people for Black people. Places to safely work, to live, to learn, and shop and play and worship. It was so prosperous, in fact, that it was known as America's Black Wall Street. Can you imagine the relief, the pride, the freedom of being a Black person living in that community? The freedom to follow what was always touted as the American dream, to be financially successful and safe enough to thrive. And then in 24 hours, to have that entire reality destroyed by the hatred, fear, or envy of white people. This is our history, the legacy that we inherit, the one that we are called to help make right. Because not only did that massacre devastate the lives and the property of the people who lived in Greenwood in 1921, it wiped out so much of the progress, the inheritance, and the generational wealth that might have shaped and secured the fortunes of Black children and grandchildren over these past 100 years. And it wiped out the story of a prosperous, thriving Black community. As a faith community called to help bend the arc of the moral universe toward justice, it is our sacred obligation to look for and amplify the stories that have been marginalized. We are called to face the trauma head on, but also to lift up the triumphs of communities in the face of oppression. So what might that look like? In her testimony before Congress, Ms. Viola Fletcher was very clear. Justice would look like financial reparations. Justice would look like survivors and their descendants having a say in how Tulsa commemorates and responds to its history. Perhaps upon hearing this story, we hear a call to advocate for financial equity and compensation for those from whom so much was taken away. Or maybe we hear a call to fight against restrictive curricula, to speak up against school boards banning conversations about race and racism in case it makes white students uncomfortable, which is happening in communities across the country. Maybe we hear a call to delve into our nation's history ourselves, as I know so many of you have been doing, to understand how we have inherited a system that is fundamentally structured around white supremacy, so that we might better dismantle it. If we're looking for stories of triumph, here's one. The documentary called All In, The Fight for American Democracy follows Stacey Abrams' work to end race-based voter suppression, including telling some of the story of voting rights in our country. It's a powerful documentary. I recommend it. And it's another instance of perhaps not having gotten the full picture in history class. Were you to ask me, up until pretty recently, about voting rights, I would have said that the civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s was when Black Americans fought for and won the right to vote without impediment. What I learned from this documentary and subsequent readings was that after slavery was abolished in 1865, formerly enslaved Black folks could not only vote, but they actually gained substantial political power. After the Civil War, Congress actually ordered the Army to register Black Southern men to vote in 1867. In a series of a few months, you had people throughout the South in places where people had been slaves as recently as 2 years before, now participating in, now voting in, and even being elected to serve to remake the Constitution. During this era after the Civil War, known as the Reconstruction, there was this brief window of Black enfranchisement. In the 30 years between 1870 and 1900, 23 Black men served in the US Congress from formerly Confederate Southern states, including 5 men who had formerly been enslaved. Talk about triumph. But again, when folks in power feel threatened, they tend to strike back. Journalist Adrienne Horton describes it this way. By the turn of the 20th century, Southern states turned to the so-called Mississippi Plan to systematically deny minorities the right to vote by using the societal conditions imposed upon African Americans, such as poverty and low literacy rates, as the preconditions for voting. Hence, poll taxes, literary tests rigged for failure, the permanent barring of felons, which disenfranchised African Americans targeted by draconian penal codes for everyday behavior, such as loitering on a street. Voter intimidation, harassment, violence, it goes on. Horton concludes, Jim Crow legislation ravaged the swift gains of Reconstruction and held back the Black electorate for nearly a century. By the 1950s, when I thought the story of voting rights really got started, only 3% of age-eligible Black people in the South were registered to vote. Here again is our call to help bend the arc toward justice. When we learn about the history of voter suppression in our country, we see just how insidious and intentional it is, but how it wasn't inevitable. And we see what a shift in power can look like when people's voting rights are upheld. We see that billy clubs and horses have evolved into strict voter ID laws, gerrymandered districting, and intentional poll closures, that it's all part of the same power playbook. Perhaps this is where we hear a call to be fierce advocates for fair elections and voter protections. The title of today's sermon is a quote from a lyric in the musical Hamilton. In it, George Washington is giving advice to a young Alexander Hamilton, who is about to command his first troops in the Revolutionary War. Washington says, "Let me tell you what I wish I'd known when I was young and dreamed of glory. You have no control who lives, who dies, who tells your story." This, in real time as we live our lives, is true. And yet, we have the power to find those stories and to make sure they're told. and so far as they can be, that they be set right. History has its eyes on us. Beloveds, when we lit our chalice today with the words from Erica Hewitt, we invoked the memory of all of the people who had been told explicitly or implicitly through police violence or government policy, through derision and dehumanization, that they are anything less than whole, anything less than beloved. As we learn the history that we have inherited, let us look for and amplify the voices of those whom history would marginalize. As we go out into the world, may we make of our lives a beacon, a symbol of our promise to draw the circle wide, a sign that we will not rest until all means all. So may it be, and amen. I invite us to raise our voices together in that hope, that commitment to building that better future of freedom and justice with the hymn, I Wish I Knew How It Would Feel to Be Free. I invite us to sing along.
I wish I knew how it would feel to be free. I wish I could break all these chains holding me. I wish I could say all the things I could say. Say them loud, say them clear for the whole world to hear. Say them loud, say them clear for the whole world to hear. I wish I could share all the love in my heart. Remove all the bars that still keep us apart. I wish you could know what it means to be me. Then you see and agree, everyone should be free. Then you see and agree, everyone should be free. I wish I could give all I'm longing to give. I wish I could live like I'm longing to live. I wish I could do all the things I can do. Though I'm way overdue, I
Did that freeze for everybody else?
Yes.
Though I'm way overdue, I'd be starting anew. I wish I could be like a bird in the sky. How sweet it would be if I found I could fly. I'd soar to the sun and look down at the sea. Then I'd sing 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free. Then I'd sing 'cause I'd know how it feels to be free. I'm bummed we didn't get to hear the end of Jacob's version there because it was beautiful, but we do best with what we've got. Our closing words are from the poet Adrienne Rich. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. let us go and do likewise. Amen. Our postlude today is the song Glory, which was written for the movie Selma about Dr. Martin Luther King and the Voting Rights Act. Mary, thank you for screen sharing that. I want to, in a moment, we'll do our announcements, but I want to thank those who helped bring this service together, to Jacob for the music, to Ross for being service assistant, and especially to Mary and Jacob for jumping in. Alicia is away this weekend, and we've gotten so used to her covering so many technical bases that it was a team effort to cover that today. So thank you all, and to you all for being present. So coming up this week are two thank you connection circles. So the one on Monday is the informal kind of check-in conversation. This Friday will be a themed discussion about stories from our past. I think it's going to be lovely. Next Sunday is, I'm excited about this, is Sermons of Love, Lessons from Broadway. So I think it's going to be just great fun, lots of musical theater. If that's your thing, please come prepared with like your jazz hands. I'm excited for that. Following next week's service at about 11:45, please plan to stay for our annual congregational meeting. At that point, we'll be talking about and voting on the budget, and you'll be getting a ballot in your email or by paper mail, depending on how you get communications from church. Please plan to come for that, as well as getting that ballot to elect our next slate of church leaders. So please plan to come to that. Next Saturday, no, 2 Saturdays from the 12th, will be kind of the first committee meeting back at the church building as we kind of ease back into being together in person in some ways. So the Development and Engagement Committee will be meeting that Saturday at 2. Please plan to come with your mask on, but I'm sure it'll be really good to be together. And then the following Saturday on June 19th from 10 to 11 a.m., please put it in your calendar to come, if you're local to the area and are able to come for a flower swap on our church lawn. We'll also do a little something to commemorate Juneteenth. And the following Sunday will be our flower ceremony service. So a lot of great things coming up in the next couple weeks. And you've gotten so many emails this week from the church. So we just wanted to make sure we're able to make sure everyone gets all of the news they need about what's going on at church. So we let you all know by email this week that on July 31st, I'll be wrapping up my time at All Souls, as I've been offered a full-time interim position. In a very nearby church, I'll be at Theodore Parker Church in West Roxbury. So 12 minutes from home, not far from Braintree. Still, I'm sure we will bump into each other at protests and at Pride and things like that. So I'll be spending June preaching a bunch more, getting us set up for hybrid worship where we're also in person. June 27th for the General Assembly service, which will be broadcasting in our parish hall. I will be present at that, so we'll be able to see each other there, as well as Flower Sunday. July, I'll be helping us transition to our next minister, who is on their way to being chosen. And August 1st, you will have somebody amazing starting. The search committee headed up by Ross, also including Sal Vento and Jane Fogg, have been in conversation with a lot of really great candidates. So I'm sure there will be more news soon on that. But I'm going to have several weeks to get gushy and emotional. So there will be a lot to say, but I will just say it is absolutely bittersweet to have a good new thing coming, and also to mean that I won't be with you in the same way. So more will come, but I just want to thank you for 2 incredible years for the ministry we've done together. So if you would like to talk with me directly about anything, I'm available by Zoom or for an outdoor visit if you're kind of local to the area. If you have questions for the search committee, you could chat with Ross. But also we'll have a special breakout room if anybody wants to check in about their thoughts on transitions from me to whomever our next minister is. We'll have a breakout room just for that this afternoon. So, in a moment. All right, I think those are all of the announcements. Joe, did I miss anything? You usually have at least something that I've missed. Thumbs up if I've got everything that you had on your mind.
I just want to let people know that there's communication going out regarding the signups for summer services.
Thank you. I knew I was going to miss something. Thank you. So yes, and summer services will be in person in the parish hall as well as on Zoom. So lots of opportunity for anybody to lead a conversation or reading a poem or a discussion. So